Hi guys, my name is Jillian Kuttner and I'm going to be talking to you about Andrea Yates. Andrea Yates was born on July 2nd, 1964 in Texas. She grew up to be a high school valedictorian, a swimming champion, a college graduate, and a registered nurse. Andrea Yates married Russell Yates in 1989 and continued to work as a nurse up until the birth of their first son Noah in 1994. Following the birth of Noah, Andrea began to experience what she referred to as visions. One of these visions involved her seeing a knife, and then that image of a knife transformed into someone being stabbed. In 1996, Russell Yates got hired by NASA and the Yates family moved to Florida. They leased out their home in Texas and decided to move into a mobile home. It was at this time that Andrea Yates contacted the wife of a traveling evangelist, Rachel Winarki, and Yates wrote her that she was feeling extremely lonely. Winarki instructed Yates to read the Bible. In 1998, the Yates family moved back to Texas and moved into a converted bus. This unconventional surrounding only furthered Andrea's feelings of being isolated, lonely, and depressed. Yates became increasingly engaged in organized religion, much to her husband's concern. In 1999, after the birth of their fourth child, and while Andrea was taking care of her father who had Alzheimer's, Andrea tried to commit suicide by overdosing on prescription medication. She was hospitalized and diagnosed as being severely mentally ill. Months later, Andrea tried to commit suicide again by pressing a knife to her throat. Following one of her suicide attempts, Yates revealed to a psychologist that, "I had a fear I would hurt somebody. I thought it better to own my own life and prevent it." After giving birth to her last child, Yates was prescribed Zoloft, a powerful antidepressant, and Haldol, a powerful antipsychotic. Yates stopped taking the Haldol because of its unpleasant side effects. Yates began staying in bed all day. She developed sores from picking her own skin. She hardly spoke to anyone. She was barely eating and drinking, and she even tried to carve the number 666, Satan's numbers, into her arms. On June 18, 2001, Russell Yates met with Andrea's psychiatrist to discuss changing Andrea's medications since it seemed like her current medications were not working. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, Russell Yates monitored his wife taking her antidepressant medications and left for work. It was the last time he would see his wife as a free woman. Shortly after her husband left, Andrea Yates filled the family bathtub with water. She called her son Paul into the bathroom, drowned him, carried him into the bedroom, laid him on the bed, and covered him with a sheet. She followed the same procedure with her remaining 4 children, except her oldest, who was too heavy for her to carry into the bedroom. After ensuring her oldest son Noah was dead, Yates dialed 911 and claimed she needed an ambulance because she was ill. She then dialed her husband and told him he needed to come home because she had hurt the children. Within days of her arrest, Yates was evaluated by 2 clinical psychologists regarding her competency to stand trial. Dr. Gerard Harris believed that Yates was not competent because of her religious delusions. Dr. Stephen Rubenzer believed that Yates was competent to stand trial despite her mental illness. After a jury deliberated on the topic, as is customary in Texas competency hearings, Yates was found competent. Andrea Yates would be going to trial for murdering her 5 children. The nation was outraged at the thought of a woman murdering her own children. However, there were highly publicized media accounts claiming that Russell Yates was controlling, he pushed Andrea to have more children, he held rigid religious beliefs, and he was perceived as indifferent to his wife's depression. Many people felt as if Russell Yates should have been held as an accessory to the murder of his children. Regardless, when Andrea Yates went on trial in 2002, 2 key facts were undisputed. Yates had drowned her 5 children, and she suffered from a severe mental illness. As the trial began, Andrea Yates entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Insanity remains perhaps the single most controversial area at the intersection of psychology and law. Insanity requires that, due to mental illness, a defendant lacks the moral responsibility and culpability for their crime and therefore should not be punished. The legal standard in Texas at the time of the Yates trial was the revised M'Naughton test. It would be of no significance whether Andrea knew the nature or consequences of what she did. Rather, the only determination to be made was whether Andrea knew drowning her children was wrong. Andrea's extensive history of psychiatric illness was put on the pedestal during her trial. Dr. Philip Bresnick testified on behalf of the defense, claiming that Andrea was most likely suffering from some sort of acute psychosis, and that she believed killing her children was in their best interest because she was saving them from Satan. Resnick believed that Andrea covered her children with a sheet after drowning them because it was a sign of respect. Resnick believed that Yates knew what she was doing was legally wrong, but that Yates believed murdering her children was morally right because of her religious delusions. Dr. Park Dietz testified on behalf of the prosecution, and although he refused to ultimately say if he believed Yates was insane, he believed that Yates intentionally hid her thoughts of harming her kids from other people because she knew people would try and stop her. After it was revealed that Dietz was a consultant for Law & Order, Yates was a frequent watcher of Law & Order, and that an episode was aired depicting a woman with postpartum depression drowning her children in a bathtub and claiming insanity, the jury of 8 women and 4 men took less than 4 hours to come back with a verdict of guilty. The jurors agreed with the prosecution that Yates knowingly drowned her children. She made the choice knowing it was a sin in the eyes of God and a crime in the eyes of the state. However, before jurors could decide if Yates would receive life in prison or the death penalty, it was revealed that no such episode of Law & Order existed. It was erroneous testimony. The jurors were informed of this error, and Yates avoided the death penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison. Yates's attorneys appealed to the Court of Appeals for the First District of Texas, stating that the jury relied on false or perjured testimony in their decision. The court ruled in favor of the appeal and granted Yates a second trial. During the second trial, there was no mention of the Law & Order episode. A jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for 13 hours and came back with the verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. Yates was subsequently transferred to a mental health facility. Following Andrea Yates's trial, 2 main issues were brought into the spotlight: the narrow definition of insanity under Texas law and the role of Russell Yates in the murders of his children. Texas's definition of insanity is so narrow that it is nearly impossible to meet it. To highlight this, after Yates was found guilty in her first trial, her defense attorney stated, "If this woman does not meet the standard for insanity, nobody does. We might as well wipe it off the books." In addition, there is a tendency for people to attribute the cause of a woman's violent behavior to biological or psychological factors that are outside of her control. This leads to the insanity defense being more acceptable for females. There was no doubt that Yates was mentally ill following her children's births, which led many women to sympathize with Yates that what she did was due to biological factors beyond her control. Many people felt that the wrong parent was being prosecuted. Regardless, it is so sad that 5 innocent young children had to lose their lives because of a mentally ill mother and an indifferent father.